And joining us today on the Book Talk segment, great to welcome, man who's written a very interesting book called People Analytics, How Social Sensing Technology Will Transform Business, and what it tells us about the future of work. We're joined today by Ben Waber from up in Boston, Massachusetts. And Ben, good to talk to you. How are you today?
Doing well. Great to be here.
Yeah, I had a chance to read through the book. Really fascinating topic, not only for the business aspect, but I guess just learning about human beings, right? I guess that was that what kind of got you interested in this whole topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's something where I'm just, really interested in trying to understand, how do people, collaborate with each other? How do they behave? And really, what are the things that underlie our behaviors? What are sort of the levers that we have as people to help us and to help others really change our behaviors and change the way we interact with each other?
I think especially the last few years, maybe going back 5 to 10 years, but really in the last couple, where businesses are really changing the way they operate, not only in size of offices, but people working out of the home and the technology involved. It really has changed this whole aspect of communicating with each other, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. And what's interesting is the way that we've gone about making those changes hasn't really been based on any sort of hard data. There's just an idea that, if we have people work from home and not work in the office, well, we can have a smaller office, we can have fewer desks, and so we're going to save money. But it's a very myopic view of really what actually a company is. I mean, fundamentally, we're in companies because together we can do things we couldn't do by ourselves. And so, what I just want to say is, well, all right, well, let's look at the data around this. If you don't go into the office, well, sure, you can still email people, you can still call people over the phone. And the things you're going to miss is you're not going to miss the meetings and all those things. You're just going to miss bumping into people at the coffee machine and eating lunch with people. And the question is, well, what value does that have? How much money does a company make when employees eat lunch together? And this is something in the book where I actually, look at these sort of questions and say, when people work remotely, how does that impact the way that they work, the way that they collaborate with other people, but also how does it impact the performance and the job satisfaction, actually, of the people that they work with? And I think you really need to take that holistic view and really understand what are the numbers behind this before we make some of these big decisions.
You have that chapter called The Water Cooler Effect. A friendly chat can be the most important part of the workday, and it really is if you're working by yourself, and nothing wrong with that, but you need that 5 or 10 minutes every a couple hours just to get up, maybe walk around and talk about sports or whatever you want to talk about. That really is a big part of the workday, isn't it?
Yeah, it was interesting when we looked at the data. It's something where a lot of us have this, I think, sort of negative reaction towards getting interrupted, or in some companies you'll have a negative view of, you'll pass by, the water cooler, the coffee machine, and you'll see two people chatting there, and people think that they're slacking off. But actually, by getting hard data on these things, we can actually show that these are extremely valuable, not just for those individuals, but for the company as a whole.
And that is really even been more diminished now, like you mentioned before, with not only email, but this whole chatting thing. To me, I don't like that whole tool. I mean, I guess it's fun for a while, but when somebody just pops up on your computer and they want to chat with you, I mean, it could be work-related, but it really takes the whole, personal contact way out of it, doesn't it? At least in my opinion, it does.
Right, and I guess the question is not, it's not necessarily saying that one thing is bad in all circumstances or one thing is good in all circumstances. It's really saying, and what we try to do is say, well, listen, we have some data on this. So, for example, for looking at, instant messaging or looking at emails, well, there are email servers where we can actually, mine the data out of those servers and relate those patterns to how productive someone is, to how happy someone is, to how long people stay with the company. But for face-to-face communication, you couldn't really do that before until, and what I talk about in the book is how we actually created sort of these next-generation ID badges that allow you to understand, actually measure interaction between people without giving away individual information, but really looking at who's talking to who and doing voice analysis, not looking at what people say, but looking at how people are actually talking to each other and relating those patterns to all these outcomes that we care about.
Yeah, you can write an email and maybe try and be funny or if you're more serious than you want to be, but you can't always tell nuance in what somebody writes. So it is important to see the person occasionally just to the facial expressions or the tone of voice is as important as the content of the message, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and that's something that really gets lost. I mean, this idea that you can say something over email that you could say face to face. Well, but think about it. I mean, let's say we want to have a debate around what sort of investments should we make over the next year? And, well, I could spend a couple hours, thinking about it, writing an email, then you spend some time reading that email, spend another couple of hours thinking about it and writing a reply. It takes us a long time to come to any sort of decision, probably weeks. Or we could get together in person and we could actually hash this out and we'll come to a decision much more quickly. That's not to say that email is bad. I mean, I can't, for example, I can send an email to 1,000 people just by pressing a button, and I can't do that face-to-face. I can't talk to 1,000 people face-to-face. Just not possible. And so, but what that means is that, email is useful for sort of more massive dissemination of pretty, simple facts. As soon as you start to get into nuance like you were talking about, things like face-to-face start to get an awful lot better. Things like phone and even video chat can be a lot better. But even those tools tend to be used a lot more for planned meetings. Mm-hmm. And as we were able to show, it's these serendipitous interactions that happen that are very difficult to plan that generate a lot of the value for individuals and for companies.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess as technology improves, you see more and more of the video aspect where people can talk to each other over the computer face-to-face. That'll I guess, make that a little bit better, alleviate some of that problem, but we're not quite there yet, I guess. And just kind of looking at your title, Ben, Sociometric Solutions, that's the name of your company, right? Interesting
exactly.
Type of business to be in, but I guess that's what you do. You go to companies and kind of look it over and see how they can improve their communication. Is that what you do?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that we deploy these next generation ID badges. We look at we look at email, we look at IM data, and phone call data, and we relate this to job satisfaction, to retention, to productivity, to engagement, to creativity. All these things that the companies care about, but what we do is we put some hard numbers on them, and we say, really what are the levers that companies have at their disposal? And sure, you look at, what does the org chart look like? How are teams put together? How are people paid? But increasingly, we're seeing that some of the biggest levers companies have at their disposal are really, things like, how is the office laid out? What sort of communication tools do people use? Do you give people free lunch? Do you give people free coffee? Those things are typically not viewed as management tools, but in fact are more powerful than things that we typically associate with management, like the org chart, like the hierarchy. Mm-hmm. And it's just been because we've been able to get hard data on this, by collecting behavioral sensing data and the digital communication data, we can start to make these substantive changes at a very large scale.
Are businesses becoming more receptive to it, Ben? I guess some of the older ones may be a little more difficult to integrate this type of technology and science, but I guess you see more and more smaller businesses, particularly technology companies, probably gravitating toward it, right?
Yeah, certainly the early adopters tend to be more technology focused. We've actually done a lot, and some of the work I talk about in the book is in finance, a lot of work in pharmaceuticals. So there's sort of two classes of companies that tend to be very interested in this. One are companies that have very good metrics around performance. So you think about things like call centers, but you also think about computer programmers and engineers, where they have these very complex technological dependencies that you can actually look at, from their computer systems. And the idea there is that, if I'm working on code and my code depends on your code, if we don't talk to each other, it's about 12 times more likely that a bug will pop up. It's going to take us 32% longer to develop the code. So trivially, you look at how does communication match up with those ideals, and you see to what causes people to have that communication. The other group of companies are organizations that have very poor metrics around outcomes. Pharmaceuticals is a good example because they have these researchers who once every 10 years they'll come up with a new drug, but the rest of the time they work on something that never sees the light of day. That's just the nature of the beast. But the issue is then, okay, well, how do you evaluate these people? Because the way it works today is essentially you ask their boss, do you like this guy? And if they say yes, they get a raise or they get promoted. They say no, then you don't. And what we actually care about is, how creative are these people? How much more likely are we to come up with this next new drug? How much do they help other people come out with new drugs? And what we can do with the badges is look at, again, who talks to who, and we can see, are these people spanning sort of different divisions? Are they helping to, people come up with new ideas, which you can see by just looking at these serendipitous conversations? And are they really changing the way, that the company works? And if they are, then that's a very good thing, and that's something that they should be rewarded for. And if they're not, then that's something you need to help them do. And so you sort of get these, those companies, but also these very hard companies that both tend to really see the value in this initially. But certainly we've been expanding over a whole variety of areas.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic and a science to deal with. And the name of the book is called People Analytics. We've been talking with Ben Waber today. And Ben, give a website up. People get a hold of the book or get a hold of you if they like.
Yeah, so the book is People Analytics, and the website is www.socio-metric.com.
Great. Ben, pleasure to talk to you for a few minutes. Good luck with the book, and keep in touch with us. Next time you have a project come out, we'll have you on again.
Thanks so much.